County Civic Federation. Long meetings there. Anyway, the agenda is published in the newsletter, and we begin our meetings with a call to order and introductions. And how we start out our meetings is that we have people introduce their name, their primary affiliation. I would ask if you're not a political candidate, please do not give a campaign speech. We are a nonprofit organization. And,
Nonpartisan.
Nonpartisan, and we ask people to not do their campaign stuff speech because we only have the room till 10 o'clock, and if everybody did that, we'd never get out of here in time. So please restrain yourself. I know some of the candidates here have been very enthusiastic in past meetings and want to launch into the speeches that we really cannot allow everybody else here, so please refrain. With that, Madam Chair, would you like to start?
Jerry Garson, the treasurer.
Dick Coffinger.
And you are?
I'm a past president, 24 years ago, a long time ago.
Lily Chee, Office of the County Executive.
I'm Greg Leroy, the Executive Director of Good Jobs First, a nonprofit group in Washington, D.C.
Carol Barth, I'm filming the proceedings, and I would ask everybody who didn't sign in, because some woman named Carol didn't put the sign-in sheets in time, to please sign in now.
I'm Jackie Boko with Northwood Four Corners Civic Association.
And newsletter editor?
Oh, and I do the newsletter and the website.
My name is Tim Tennant. I'm a resident of Gaithersburg.
Daniela Shiveco, second vice president and immediate past president of the Kensington Heights Civic Association.
I'm Jeff Griffiths, vice president of Parkwood Residents Association.
I'm Tim Willard, I'm the Green Party candidate for County Council. I am the only candidate who will never give a speech before the Civic Federation.
I'm Benny Condrey, first vice president of the Civic Federation.
John Foreman. I'm an associate member of Kensington Heights Civic Association, host of the Activist Podcast.
I am Bill Conway. I'm a candidate for County Council at Large.
I'm Stephen Brown, treasurer of the Huntington Towers Association.
I'm Ed Amantetti. I'm board member of the Montgomery County Taxpayers League, and I'm running for candidate in our county.
Neil Greenberger, I am a candidate for Montgomery County Council at Large.
Ho Jin-shin, I'm running for mayor and the senator at District 15.
Hi everyone, I'm Brandy Brooks. I live in Wheaton and I'm a candidate for Montgomery County Council at Large.
Hi, I'm Danielle Ring. I live in the Aspen Hill area and I'm here as part of the campaign team for Brandy Brooks at Large.
AJ, I'm a member of the Aspen Civic Association, a Green Party member and candidate for state senate in District 19.
I'm Diane Jang. I'm a member of the Aspen Civic Association.
That's everyone.
That's it? Okay. Next item is the approval of the agenda, which was published in the newsletter. So unless anybody has any additions, I have a motion to approve the agenda.
Aye.
Okay, second?
Second.
Okay, ayes?
Aye.
Nays? Abstentions? All right, the agenda stands approved. Next item on the agenda is the announcements. Please keep them short if you do have any announcements. No hands up, no announcements. Okay, thank you very much. Treasurer's report, Jerry.
I'm Jerry Garson, the treasurer of the Montgomery County Civic Federation. We're on a fiscal year that started July 1st of 2017 and ends at the end of June, but through May 14th. We had membership dues of $1,985, awards dinner reservations that we've already received. We have a number of commitments from other people of $1,190, grants of $1,000, giving us total revenues of $4,175. We had expenses totaling $2,272, made up of post office box, Federation meetings of $675, awards dinner, deposit, memberships, and committee expenses and insurance, giving us a net income for the period of $1,903, and our bank balance at the moment is $12,453. If there are any questions or anyone would like a copy, see me at the end of the meeting. I'd also like to make an announcement. Our awards dinner is this coming Friday night. Starts at 6:30 through 9 p.m. at the New Fortune Restaurant at 1615 515 South Frederick Avenue, which is Rockville Pike, basically just north of 370. If anyone would like to sign up for it now, you can either see me or Carol is actually handing out awards dinner things. If you don't mail it by around Wednesday or even by tomorrow, please send me an email that you are attending, and we will make sure we have enough food for everyone who's attending. Are there any questions? Not, I can go back to Jim.
Okay. Thank you, Jerry. Great report. Well, now we'll move into the program, which will be on the topic of economic development in Montgomery County. It's a hot topic. We have two excellent speakers this evening. So briefly to start, the issue of economic development is a controversial issue. In the last couple of weeks, there's been some in the press about issues about what's going on in the county. 3 points I want to start off by giving a little bit of context here. There's a lot of competition that the county faces. It's a high-risk issue and an uncertain future as well. Well, every jurisdiction, whatnot, practically, you've got 50 states and 6 territories that are trying to attract companies and development. Their jurisdictions, you have 1,300 U.S. counties that also make the kind of pitches being for various companies trying to develop companies in their areas. You have 605 U.S. cities with 50,000 populations or more, and just about everybody else. And it also really relative in terms of capabilities. Lived in Wisconsin, and it may be difficult to, but for example, one county in Wisconsin had one business, a sawmill, the entire county. Have other jurisdictions that incredible poverty. Lima, Ohio, 90% of the population there qualifies for a federal food subsidy program. Camden, New Jersey, that community was so bad during the recession, they had to lay off 20% of the police force. So there's extreme poverty, there's extreme problems in terms of having viable businesses, those kinds of things. And we are extremely blessed with many qualities that many other jurisdictions would just be envious to have. And so, but we have other jurisdictions that we can match, and that's one of the issues like Bucks and Fairfax County and other cities and everything else that are going on. So, high risk. Startup corporations, companies that people are always trying to get, but have about a 79 to 90% failure rate. So there's a lot of risk about that. Established businesses also can be very difficult. How about all these companies? Remember what they were. One point in time, they were all pretty much either leaders in their respective markets in retail and doing Lotus software. People remember Lotus 123 was the first micro-based spreadsheet software. Controlled the market. They were one of the reasons people bought IBM PCs. And if you might remember just a bit of research, if you really were in microcomputers, they actually made the operating system before there was Microsoft DOS, CPM. And so literally what they had was the operating system like Windows now, that every time you buy a computer, you buy the operating system. So it's incredible controls of market that these companies had. and have disappeared very memories at this point for people. So it's a high-risk situation in a couple of years. Some people might remember back in September 2017, Discovery Channel had announced that they're doing a $10 million renovation of the Silver Spring headquarters in the county and state. They're going to lend them money for this wonderful investment in their headquarters. But then, 4 months later, they're out of here. 4 months. Suddenly, something like looked so positive, and they said in this announcement that they had thought long and hard about this, or at least maybe 4 months before they pull up stakes. So this can be a higher risk proposition, making an investment, making loans, subsidies, other kinds of things that these corporations can just cut and run very fast when they want to do. The other thing that we do in economic development is an uncertain future. Likely technological disruptions that are occurring. In 2016, the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, they had to focus on jobs and the future of jobs. They were saying things like self-driving cars, 3D printing, whatnot. They estimated in the next 5 years, 7 million jobs worldwide are simply going to disappear because of new technologies that are going to eliminate jobs, professions, and things that are there. So those kinds of things are coming on the near horizon. There's new business models disrupting. There's Airbnb, so that's threatening the hospitality industry. They have Uber and Lyft threatening the taxi industries. So there are all these kinds of things happening, demographic changes. So, as a quote, the future ain't what it used to be. If you assume the future is going to be the same as the past, you're very likely, like some of those companies that showed you their logos, that yeah, the future won't be a good place for them. So, and to give you an idea, the thing that's rapidly changing, there's a company in Texas that's working on a 3D printer that if they're successful in their technology, will be able to build a house in 2 days. There's another company that's working on a 3D printer to create fabric. So what they possibly have is you on a computer, you can have your personal measurements, pick out a design, have a custom tailored suit made out for you in a matter of hours. Of course, Amazon is experimenting with drone delivery, and the US DOT is doing pilot testing on that. So you can sit in your computer, order a custom-made suit, within a matter of hours, have a drone dropping it down in your front yard. So there's all kinds of jobs and professions and distribution channels that are going to be rapidly changing as all of these technologies replace the assumptions of how retail, how manufacturing all goes on in this country and the world. And so again, as far as our assumptions, as far as economic development, we have to start thinking in terms, think in terms of new models, because the past is not going to apply to the future. And so that is one of the challenges as far as people deal with economic development, is they have to begin to start thinking about this future, because if they're stuck in the past, they're not going to be up on what industry business wants in the future. So, those are some of the challenges, and that's my thing. So our first speaker tonight is Greg Leroy. He's a 17-year Montgomery County resident, married to a Moco native, and have 2 daughters in MCCF schools. We can tell them some of our stuff in the schools later. He founded and directs Good Jobs First, a 20-year-old nonprofit, nonpartisan resource center promoting corporate and government accountability and economic development. He's the author of The Great American Jobs Scam, Corporate Tax Dodging, and the Myth of Job Creation, 2005, has been dubbed the leading national watchdog of state and local economic development subsidies. Good Jobs First is the home to Subsidy Tracker, the only national database of subsidy awards. The organization is cited about 100 times per month in the news media, and Greg has been working on economic development reforms for more than 30 years. Started in Chicago, where he lived half of his adult life. He has spoken trained or testified hundreds of times for grassroots groups, associations of public officials, state and local governments, and for journalists. So we're very fortunate to have someone with business expertise and knowledge here to speak with us tonight, and certainly appreciate it. Greg, you're
Thanks, Jim.
up for
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you, Jim, and good evening, everyone. Thanks for the chance to speak to my home county crowd here. I'm going to sit down and get this show up in here a minute. So, Good Jobs First, as Jim explained, is a nonprofit, nonpartisan group. We're kind of a one-stop shop for anybody who wants to improve economic development incentive programs or deals. I've actually written 2 books on the subject, and we do report card studies, we have model legislation, we testify, we've issued more than 120 studies. We have 3 big databases on our website. I'm going to show you a couple of them quickly. Nobody knows exactly how much states and cities spend on economic development. There's a lot of reporting gaps. This is the most sophisticated academic number I can give you. These are the big kinds of programs, right? Property sales and income taxes, the main taxes that companies would normally pay to support public services. Many of them go away for 10 or 15 or 20 or more years in the name of economic development. But here's the dirty big secret of incentives. They almost never matter. Because they can't, because they're too small. And here's why. If you look at what companies spend money on, that is their cost structure, right, and comparing cost structures in cities A versus B, C, D, and F, right, is the way you decide where to expand or relocate, right? The thing that companies spend their money on, the business basics, constitute 98.2% of their cost structure. That is labor, occupancy, raw material, logistics, energy, CEO bonuses, bananas, code writers, whatever it is that the company uses a lot of, right? Iron ore, varies a great deal by facility or company. All state and local taxes combined equal 1.8% of the average American company's cost structure. So tiny changes in those big cost variables, the business basics, dwarf anything that can be done with the tax code. Right? Tiny changes in your labor occupancy costs would completely obliterate any shaving of some fraction of 1.8%. That's not what the economic development location consulting industry wants you to know, but that's the dirty big secret behind the incentives debate. So this is not a new problem. This has been going on for 80 years. The corporate welfare industry, or whatever you want to call it, was born in the late 1930s. It's associated with the South originally as states using incentives to lure businesses from the North. That certainly is the early history, starting in the 30s through the post-war era and the construction of the interstate highway system. It makes for some great investigative journalism, and here's an example of one state that, everything going on in that state is getting a tax break, whether it's they spend more money on Duck Dynasty in Louisiana than they do at the University of New Orleans, right? And they subsidize poverty wages at Walmart, and they pay enormous subsidies per job for highly capital-intensive liquefaction and petrochemical refining plants. It's not unusual, though. In fact, for every $1 in corporate income tax revenues that Louisiana collects, it forgives 10. And it's not unusual. Michigan is the same problem, and other states have the same problem, where overall, if you look at all corporate taxes versus tax credits and tax breaks, Louisiana and Michigan have foregone more than they collect in aggregate. That's how powerful, from a budget point of view, these incentives have become. They're very significant state budget issues and local budget issues. So we have what are called mega deals, that is mostly 9 and 10 figure deals, single transactions costing hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars. These are some of the ones you may have read about in recent years in the newspaper, and I put that the Maryland bid for Amazon HQ2 at the bottom of the list. You'll notice that it would now be the second biggest deal in U.S. history, right behind the top bullet there, the Boeing deal that was granted, the second big multi-billion-dollar Boeing deal granted by Washington State a few years ago. I have more to say about the shape of that deal in a second. So to the extent we can put a price tag on these mega deals, that's the average price per job. And the reason that's a significant number is at that cost, we taxpayers can never, ever break even, right? Because there's no way anybody working at any of these workplaces is ever going to pay $658,000 more in state and local taxes than public services they and their families consume over their working lifetime. No state has a tax regimen that would make that happen, right? So the only thing we can honestly say here is that there's a large transfer of wealth going on from taxpayers to shareholders in these mega deals. That's the only thing we can say for sure is going on. And of course, the HQ2 race, for which Montgomery County, Northern Virginia, and the district are 3 of the 20 finalist locations, right, as Amazon continues its search. It's attracted a huge amount of attention, put a very hot spotlight on this whole profession and the kind of secretive nature. Most of these auctions are conducted publicly. This is only the 6th public auction in U.S. history. It's a very rare event, and therefore, for us, we've been really using it to try to educate people about how this whole system works. And then there's this other weird thing going on. We've never had a president who actually endorsed the war among the states, right? The war among the states, the second war among the states, is a phrase that was coined by Businessweek 42 years ago. This is not a new problem, not a new concept, but we've never had a president say, go for it, right? And then we also know that not only did he bless this problem, this system, but he then participated actively in it in the Foxconn deal, right? We know from reporting in the Post that Chairman of the Foxconn, Terry Gao, met with Trump, met with Jared Kushner. They announced the deal in the White House. We know that Trump participated actively in pitting states against each other for the Foxconn deal that ended up in Wisconsin, and the current price tag for that deal is now $4.5 billion. We've had subsidies going to low-road employers. We have an entire website dedicated just to bricks and mortar subsidies to Walmart. This is, besides any safety net, healthcare, Medicaid, children's health insurance, this is bricks and mortar, TIF districts, sales tax rebates, property tax rebates for warehouses and stores. Amazon is already ahead of Walmart now. We're tracking all their subsidies both to their fulfillment centers and to their data centers, right? Amazon is the biggest cloud computing company in the world as well. They're taking down about 24 incentive deals a year now. We have a whole tracker on our website just counting those deals. They're on a real tear. And as one extreme example, and I want to pull this out because it's part of the Maryland HQ2 debate. So it's not just that we give companies reductions in their taxes, their income taxes, their sales taxes, their property taxes, right? Those are the big historical kinds of incentive pots of money. But in these 16 states, as we revealed 6 years ago, companies are actually getting money from their employees' state personal income taxes, from their payroll deductions on their paychecks. At the end of the day, at 2,700 companies in these states, workers' state personal income tax deductions are not reaching state treasuries. They're effectively ending up with their employer. And the reason I'm pointing this out, and it's terrible policy for many reasons, which people want to talk about, but of the $8.5 billion offer made by Maryland for Amazon's HQ2, 4.9% is this, right? $4.9 billion of that money is composed of Maryland agreeing to give Amazon back in cash 5.75% of every dollar paid to a new employee in the state of Maryland, right? 5.75% is the top marginal personal rate for the state. You have to earn $250,000 to pay that rate in the state of Maryland. So Amazon's actually going to get more back than most people earning, because they're not going to make most of them over 250 grand, back in cash as part of that incentive package. That's how excessive these are. What?
That's payroll tax?
Well, it's the equivalent. It's pegged at that, yes. Goldman Sachs got this for jobs that existed already. They just moved them from Lower Manhattan to Jersey City. And, as I say, that's the bulk of the money coming from the state of Maryland in terms of the incentive package that's on the table. Jim suggested I show you this database we have called Subsidy Tracker, and I'll open a browser in a second and do it, but it's a big database. We've had it up for 8 years now, and it's got a lot of data from Maryland, data from every state and most big cities and counties in the country, more than 500,000 specific company awards. And it's a very sophisticated database because we've associated all the subsidiaries with the corporate parents. So for instance, it's hard to see here, but if you dial up Berkshire Hathaway, for example, this big octopus of a company that Warren Buffett runs, you'll get all these companies you've never heard of that are actually controlled by his company, right? Geico, Ingersoll, NetJets, et cetera, et cetera. We've also looked at local governments and how well or how poorly they disclose. We've been doing state report cards for a decade, and now for several years, we've been doing city and county scorecards too. Montgomery County is one of the big urban counties we found still doesn't disclose online company-specific information about its major incentive programs, which to us is unbelievable. But you've got company. It's not like you're the only big, theoretically sophisticated, tech-savvy local jurisdiction that's still not posting really basic information on the web. There's also a big breakthrough happening right now called GASB Statement 77. How many people know what GASB is? A few of you do, okay? Bless you, okay? So this is the body that sets forth public sector accounting rules. It's called the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. You might know it best for the place that requires states to disclose how much their pension liabilities are, their retiree healthcare obligations, right? That's how most people know GASB. We've been critical of GASB forever because they've never set forth any rules about disclosing tax breaks, but that all changed a few years ago. And now, just for the first time in U.S. history, 50,000 bodies of local and state government are required, under generally accepted accounting principles, to disclose how much revenue they lose to economic development tax abatement programs. Montgomery County's first report does not disclose any, and we don't think that's right. And again, you're not alone. We have compliance problems in other places too, but again, Montgomery County is not looking like it's full of sunshine. We're getting some great new journalism based on this new data, seeing how much individual programs cost cities and school districts and other states like Nevada, Georgia. Places to think of themselves, right up there with tech-savvy Maryland. And this is the database we have on our website called Subsidy Tracker 2 to capture all this new data that's coming out. Some real money being revealed in these reports. From some of the early reports we've noticed, if you look at some of the bigger cities around the United States, big urban counties, big school districts, it's real money. And we know this. We've done some studies on some of the more tax-based stressed cities like Chicago and Memphis. We know that large chunks of money are getting diverted away from public services by these incentive programs. Property tax abatements, enterprise zones, tax increment financing districts. So Jim asked me to also, now that I've sort of thoroughly bummed you out about the state of affairs in economic development, Jim asked me to also be lighter and more positive. And there is absolutely an alternative school of economic development that has many different pieces and parts, but it's predicated on a few general principles that we'll lay out and then just show you a couple other things going on. So under the system that has evolved for 80 years in the United States, it's a very corporate-dominated site location system in which government is supposed to just sit on its heels and wait passively, the so-called prisoner's dilemma, right? When Jim talks about the competition from other places, well, if you're a finalist and it's one of the auctions, one of the 99.99% of auctions that are conducted secretly, you're not even supposed to know who you're competing with. You, the public official, negotiating with this company whose identity you might not even be given at the beginning of the negotiations. You're never supposed to talk to your peer places. Even if you were to find out who you're actually competing with, you're never going to talk to them. With the implicit threat that if you did break the rules and break out the prisoner's dilemma and talk to your competing locations, you'd get blacklisted the next time by the site location consulting industry. That's the dirty truth of the way it works.
Site location consulting.
Whereas in an alternative form, government has an active role to play. There's a value add for government's role. And the emphasis is not on being indifferent to companies, it's having a robust set of public systems that benefit lots of companies and don't put tons of eggs in any one basket. Don't give mega deals because that's risky for all the reasons about technological disruption and everything else that we know is a fact of life in today's economy. There's a phrase called economic gardening or grow your own, but it's everything that the mega deal system is not, basically. There's some big strategic differences here about which kinds of companies you're focusing on. But look, we know, and there's lots of data I can show you, that year in and year out, in almost every state, every year, almost all the new net job creation comes from two kinds of things, either from startups or from expansions of existing businesses. Interstate, chasing, state line jumping, buffalo hunting is always in the low single-digit percentages of jobs created, even in a good year for a big state. It's just a waste of time. And we tell governors, don't waste tune it out. it's pocket lint in the big scheme of things. Focus on what you have, why you have it, what are your comparative advantages, and how can you help startups get to that second and third stage of life where they thrive. And it also, the alternative system envisions a bigger role, frankly, for nonprofits, for academic institutions, as well as the government. Saying, look, we have something, we have value to add here too. And the more the companies that we're assisting depend upon our university research systems, depend upon our export promotion programs, depend upon our quality control, our health insurance procurement networks and other things like that, the more likely they're going to be to stay here because they're going to be loyal, they see a value add in being here where they're getting that kind of help. So there's a foundation called the Edward Lowe Foundation. It's a pro-entrepreneurship foundation, kind of like the Kauffman Foundation in Kansas City. This is the one founded by the guy who invented kitty litter. And one of their big programs is that they help companies that are in that kind of takeoff mode, right? They've got a business plan, they've got financing, they've been in business for a little while, they've got sales, but they want to grow, and now they need more help making those next leaps. And that kind of company, so-called phase 2 or second stage companies, account for a really big disproportionate share of net job creation in the United States in most years. And they need help, they're in trouble. The state of entrepreneurship in this country is perilous right now, and we can get into why that's true, and Amazon's probably part of the answer, but what this foundation is doing is really smart and really effective in terms of if you agree with the analysis that expansions and startups are where the long-term game for job creation really comes from. The other point here, obviously, is analyzing locally owned businesses versus national chains, whether it's a retail chain or anything else. And groups like the Institute for Local Self-Reliance and the American Independent Business Alliance have done many studies looking very closely at the global economic ripple effects of a chain restaurant versus a locally owned restaurant, or a chain service sector company versus a national H&R Block or whatever. And by every measure, and the charts they gave you didn't look good on these slides, by every measure you get a better bang for the buck from locally owned companies. That is, they procure more, they advertise more, they pay more, they participate more, their supply chains are more locally rooted than Walmart, right? Walmart sucks everything to Benton and everything, right? That's the way the company operates, for example. I want to show you one other quick database too, in case I don't know if anybody here, does anybody here work for a federal regulatory agency? I know there's many up in here in the area. Well, in case you're interested, in case you want to look up companies that you're curious about, we have another database on our website which combines 43 federal regulatory agencies' records and every office of the U.S. Department of Justice, so that you can see which company is polluting or stealing wages or being cited for safe workplace practices or things like that. The database is very heavily used by economic development officials because, to their credit, many of them want to vet companies to see if they're good corporate citizens or what else they can find out about their histories in other places before they agree to give them tax breaks. My contact information. Let's see if we can find it.
I don't write as fast as you flicked it.
Sorry. Yeah. Here, let's. You want to see these databases in it? Somebody got a company they want to look up?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Westfield Group.
Westfield Group.
Ah.
It's the Australian wheat. Yes, I think we do have some.
It is
Okay.
Australian. What was that bird, by the way?
Say it again?
That yellow
The
bird.
bird
came
that
up.
popped up, not your bird,
I didn't see it.
not your bird.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah?
Yeah, so they got all the stuff.
Can I get just violation? Okay.
I think it was a tropical jay.
Nice call. Good with
No, it says we're not connected. What? I'm happy to take questions.
Yeah,
Just,
sorry.
I know, speaking
Put
of
your
that,
contact.
put my contact back up, sure. It's Good Jobs. It's goodjobsfirst.org. That really is me. It's not a screen.
Your
So-
website's going to be busy tomorrow.
I'm glad to hear that.
To
That's a good
go,
thing.
to go back to the Amazon situation.
Mhm.
So let's say Amazon comes here and Montgomery County gives them $8.5 billion in incentives.
Well, the state and the county together.
State of the county.
Right.
How long will the citizens of Maryland have to work to recoup that gift? Or will we ever
Yeah, I don't-
recoup that gift?
I mean, it's going to depend upon the ultimate cost per job over time. And there's two kinds of costs in the deal. There's fixed costs, like if they're going to make massive transportation improvements to the site, right? And that will cost the same if they hire 10,000 or 50,000 people, right? And then there's the cost tagged to the salaries, like the 5.75% rebate, which will go up or down based on their payroll. So it's hard to know what the total, what the numerator is without knowing what, and what the computation is, because you don't know what the denominator is. That's the problem with that question. But it's going to be extremely expensive. If it's $8.5 billion, you know, and I don't think we break even as taxpayers. Yeah, right. I think it's the same problem as other negatives. Please.
So when you asked Ike Leggett about this,
Yeah.
his answer is if they don't come in here, 100% of nothing gets us nothing. So how do you respond to that?
Well, except if it's a losing proposition from taxpayers, then it's a negative sum game. I mean, there's a term in economics, right? A negative sum game. It's not a zero sum game. It's not like these are existing jobs that are going to be lost to one place and gained to another. They're just going to be. They're going to arrive someplace, and then the question is the place they arrive going to overspend for them, right? Here's the other point, which I didn't make, which is this, for we as incumbent taxpayers, right? We know from studies that 80 to 85% of the new job takers at a facility like this are going to be people who don't currently reside here. They're going to come from outside the metro area. And obviously in a period of low unemployment, it's going to be at the high end of that range, right? And some of them are going to have families, right? Or they're going to get married and have families while they're here, right? So they're going to induce a lot of growth, right? We're going to have to hire more teachers, build more classrooms, widen more lanes, run more transit, pick up more trash. None of those things are free, right? If Amazon's not paying for any of the incremental costs of the growth it just induced that way, guess what happens, right? Either we all pay higher taxes to cover those incremental costs, or we all get somewhat lousier public services, or some of both. Because that's the way it's got to happen. Please.
Would this kind of analysis that you're done, I'm sympathetic to, would it even show that the attraction of the German car manufacturers into the southern states was also a losing proposition, or was there sufficient benefits there that was?
So, for the record, the BMW plant in Spartanburg, South Carolina has been there more than 20 years now, and the Volkswagen plant in Chattanooga has been there about 6 or 7 years. The BMW plant looks cheap by today's standards. It was maybe $250 million. The Volkswagen plant was worth $577. And I think it's a very open question about the net break even on especially on the BMW plant. And here's why. They've never made drivetrains in the States, right? They still import all the high value added components from Germany, the engines, the transmissions, etc., right? That's the big prize, the upstream supplier ripple effect that you want to get from an auto plant. And we've never gotten them.
Okay, so
Volkswagen is more complicated because I think they are making engines in the States. They do have a bigger supply chain. But the trouble is all these supply chain plants get the same battery of incentives as well. They're not paying property taxes. They're exempt from sales taxes when they build themselves, etc. So
we're picking up the state taxes on the employees, the payroll taxes. The fact that maybe Amazon's taking it back.
please.
Have you done any of this analysis on Maryland's past history of deals? For instance, what's gone on with Marriott, what's gone on with Lockheed Martin, and what our ROI, or lack thereof, has been on those?
We haven't. I mean, it's just because nobody's asked us to. We did do a big study in Baltimore long ago looking at the failed history of redevelopment of the Inner Harbor, the lack of linkages for neighborhood benefits, and the way that's played out. We did a study in the district looking at a bunch of deals also quite a while ago in the district. We'd love to do studies here. If somebody wants to lay some money on us to do some studies, we'd love to do that. It just takes time. Please. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, Montgomery County, a lot of the big fish mega deals like this, it doesn't even require them to track the jobs created. So, for example, Westfield Group that I wanted you to look up is an Australian corporation that has been the largest recipient of money from the Montgomery County's Economic Development Fund. Westfield Group, an Australian shopping mall owner, has received more EDF money than whole industries combined. You combine IT, we combine biotech, and still all of those different grants do not amount to the money that Westfield Group received, and for multiple projects. So, the job reporting clause has been magically deleted from the Economic Development Fund contracts negotiated by Montgomery County, so we don't even know, and there's no way to know how many jobs were created with these millions of dollars. You know?
Right, well, and I mean, this I think, even without that tracking, we do still know some things, because when the Marriott deal number 2 was going down, there was at least a little bit of tracking about the number of jobs they had or hadn't added since 1999, which was, I think, the promised number was like 700 or 800. The actual number had been 100. So even there, you can still see some of what's going on in terms of the analysis, just from the basic public information that we have.
Okay,
But it would be great to delve. It would be great to delve even deeper into this.
So I'm just going to follow up Westfield. There was another question, please.
When you try to determine break even on 8.5 billion, which is a lot of money, but just any amount of money whenever a company comes in, and apparently Amazon is, I guess, the price for a company. And I do know baseball teams have not done well when they go for that top echelon person, but that's beside the point. When you're looking at break even, how are you determining break even? Because you talk about a diversion of $8.5 billion, which includes payroll taxes, which right now are zero because there's no employees at Amazon. And so every dollar that comes from those 50,000 is an added bonus. It's also, I guess the reason they're a desirable company is because we keep losing all the Booz Allens and everything, and my son and all his friends who live in Northern Virginia, because there are zero jobs of that site, white collar jobs. I'm trying to see how they get around to break even. We'll never break even on 8.5 billion. We break even from day one on payroll taxes, because any payroll tax you get from an employee that wouldn't been in this county
You'll
is
get
a plus.
to talk later, just,
Well,
yeah.
to briefly say, for a person in a mid-range salary, they would pay 4.25%, right? Something like that, 4.5%. It's the marginal rate. But Amazon would get back 5.75%. So the refund to Amazon would exceed the revenue that the state got from the person. That's the problem.
And all these other
Just aside from the fact that the state needs that.
I guess I'm trying to understand that why is anybody getting all this money?
Lily has another.
Because of the way the
commitment here.
system has evolved over 80 years, which hamstrings public officials and makes it impossible for them to represent us successfully.
But, okay, folks, you get it.
Book is free online, it explains all
Like,
the moving parts.
she has,
Yes, please.
this is tonight's her anniversary, has another commitment here, and give her the opportunity to talk, please, and then we can pick it up again. Lily Chi is the Assistant Chief Administrative Officer for Economic and Workforce Development, responsible for the county's overall economic strategies, business climate issues, economic communications, strategic partnerships with key organizations and institutions. She has served county executive like Leggett for 8 years in various capacities, led strategic initiatives, including privatizing economic development functions, establishing BioHealth Innovation Incorporated to advance research and commercialization, developing global partnerships, improving nighttime economy, and developing the comprehensive economic strategy. Lily joined Montgomery County after serving as Vice President of Business Development and Marketing for the Washington, D.C. Economic Partnership and spokesperson for the D.C. Department of Insurance, Securities, and Banking. So, welcome, Lily. Thank you.
Good evening. I'll make it very quick. I miscalculated time. I said to my husband I'll be there for our anniversary dinner tonight at 8:30. It's 9. I'm afraid the restaurants won't stay open for us, and we want to cook. So I want to make it quick, but thanks for inviting me. I'm currently with the Office of the County Executive. I work on economic development matters, which is actually a fairly recent gig. I appreciate the presentation from Good Jobs First, but I honestly did not know what tonight's focus, the presentation would be, which is all about incentives. You know, what about the state and the county giving money to corporations, which is a very different discussion from what I thought I would be here to provide. So Jim, I want to clarify, you want me to talk about Economic Development Corporation, right?
Yeah.
Why the county has established a public-private partnership. Because I would not want to stand here and talk to you about why the county got into the Amazon deal or Marriott deal, and if we are going to get into that conversation, we should bring the team that was working on the specific deals, because in Montgomery County, and rightfully so, economic development takes a village. It takes multiple parties, even for every transaction and every deal we have been doing, right? So if you think about economic development, there's place-based economic development, and you think about, White Flint development, White Oak development, the Red Line, the transit centers and all that kind of thing. That's economic development, okay? And then you think about workforce development. Now we consider that also very much part of economic development and economic empowerment. And then there's industry-based economic development, which is what I have been working on in partnership with different nonprofit organizations. So there are many different ways in looking at that. But I, for one, have heard over the years of different communities, even when I was working in DC Economic Development, we struggled to what extent we should give incentives to corporations that simply sort of threaten to leave, right? You don't know if they actually will leave. But somebody, I think it was a governor from Indiana at the time, said, nobody likes this kind of bidding war, right? But is there a better way to do it? I think so. This is 21st century. Things are changing so fast. When we look at the future, look at how jobs are being placed by machines and all that, I think it is a new time to usher in new ways of looking at economic development. And so I welcome this kind of debates. I think it's good when more community people pay attention to economic development, because a strong economy is the foundation of a strong community. But short of better ways to do it, this is what has been working for communities, whether you think it's working or not. There are different ways of looking at it. For example, this presentation focused a lot, for example, on how much the county would pay an Amazon, right? But another way to look at it is at this point of Montgomery County's life, okay, as we try to act more like a city, which is to congregate jobs and people around dense transit-oriented areas, right, in order to compete for quality jobs. Because when you have quality jobs near where people live, you actually can mitigate traffic congestion and improve quality of life. And you don't encourage suburban sprawl, which has been the old development model. It's actually good for the community. So not all growth and development is bad, depending on where you put them, right? Because if a community does not grow and develop, it dies. You only have two choices. There's very little middle ground, So my point is, when you think about Montgomery County today, we are very federal dependent. We are also very local consumer dependent in our economy, okay? Which is not sustainable, because the federal sector is not growing, especially when you have a president like that in the White House. Okay, Maryland is not a friend. Okay, if anything, he would love to gut the budget of NIH and FDA, and NOAA maybe should probably, in his mind, go away altogether, right? So we have to encourage business growth and private sector growth, okay? And we have to look at what are the industries of the future, what is our human capital asset, and what is our locational advantage and global connection, and what makes sense. And Amazon kind of a corporate and regional headquarters is one unique area that we have identified as a core part of the economic development strategy. So it's not random. We're not going to throw money, let's say, at the Amazon warehouse jobs, okay? So there's a big difference between Amazon warehouse jobs and Amazon headquarters jobs. Because Amazon headquarters jobs are the high-quality jobs, and they're diversified, benefits paid with professional advancement opportunities, right? And when Amazon kind of corporations come to a community. What it does is it ushers in a much stronger class of entrepreneurs whose jobs don't depend on federal spending and has global export potential and all that. The beauty of headquarters companies is they create spin-offs. You know, one Marriott has created several spin-offs, and one of them actually is another Fortune 500 company, which is Host Hotels and Resorts, right, which is also moving to Bethesda and downtown. And one menu has created dozens of biotech spin-offs. I think that is hard to quantify if you want to put dollar amount to it. So here's my counter argument to your argument, right? So yes, when you look at the dollar amount, you say, oh, is Montgomery County and Maryland going to write a check? First of all, the whatever billion we're talking about is not a blank check, right? It's whatever tax credits we give to the jobs that pay $100,000 or more is conditioned on those jobs actually coming here. It's not prepayment to Amazon, okay? If Amazon's jobs don't come here, we would not be able to give them the tax credit. So what we give them is part of what they would pay to Montgomery County. At least that's my understanding. And much of that is investments into our own local community to improve the infrastructure. A lot of what we have been talking about in terms of traffic mitigation plans, how many decades have we been debating among ourselves about mass transit, right? Decades. I don't know if some of the things we're talking about will ever happen during my lifetime, okay? When you have an Amazon kind of price dangling in front of us, all of a sudden leaders have the guts to act. I'm talking about metro dedicated permanent funding from both Virginia and Maryland. Why would Richmond all of a sudden want to act? Because they know how important that is to this region. So there are certain benefits to having a major employer, an anchor tenant, which is also good for small businesses. When small businesses can have contracting opportunities with an Amazon kind of headquarters company, it's a rising tide situation, okay? So I want you to think about these things from a more holistic, comprehensive perspective, not just dollar for dollar transaction, because it's never just a pure transaction. And all the hotels people use and lunch they eat and all that, internship apprentice opportunities for students, those are hard to quantify kind of benefits, right, to a community. So I agree, nobody likes to write a check, especially if you think about how hard our people work, how hard the small businesses have to work to pay taxes. Who wants to cut a check to a large corporation that doesn't need the money, right? But you also have to look at, you know, is there a better way to do it? And what is the long-term holistic benefits to a community, right? Short of that, what is our alternative, you know? So that's my perspective. I agree, it's time for us to look at the incentives in a much more responsible way so that we don't simply get into the bidding war for the purpose of landing that trophy elephant. And I think one of the mistakes we have been making over the years is we focus so much more on trophy hunting instead of spending a lot more attention, paying a lot more attention on nurturing local, small, medium-sized businesses to make sure we don't lose them to competition, so that we have next menu, next honesty, next wedding, right? Because in today's Montgomery County, what we need is exactly the kind of companies that don't need to be here. And I'm talking about wedding wire kind of company. I'm talking about honesty kind of company. I'm talking about headquarters kind of company, right? So that's my perspective. And also, economic development, as I mentioned, it takes a village. So Economic Development Corporation, which we established to replace the Department of Economic Development, that's only like the front. That's like the face of economic development, right? It has very little control over many critical elements of economic development. And the government's role cannot be shared by those, you know, nonprofits that we fund. Government is still going to shoulder the brunt of the responsibility, which is, you know, infrastructure, workforce, and housing, and transit, all those kind of things. Those are critical to a government's role, and especially in this day and age. Local government has a very important role. In fact, someone very wise said, you know, economic development is just too important to be left to economic developers. That should be the responsibility of every leader, every mayor, every small town mayor, every council member, because your community's well-being depends on your wisdom to pivot your community and make sure they can usher in prosperity, right? especially when we're talking about everybody through child in MCPS today, is our free to reduce the meals program, especially if we're talking about 40% of seniors, or not 40%, especially if we're talking about our senior population growing 4 times faster as the general population, okay? So who's gonna pay for all the services, right? Whether they're aging population or the youths. You have to usher in economic growth, and when you put the growth and what kind of companies you want is the kind of questions that we should debate. So I welcome those kind of discussions, but I think we need to have different perspectives at the table in order to have a more holistic understanding of what economic development is all about. Okay. I have so many heads. Oh my God, what did I say?
What is the budget for the economic development?
It's about 5 million.
5 million. Okay.
What would your attitude be towards increasing the transparency? Because that seems to be one of the criticisms that this stuff is going on.
Yeah,
and it's not
all of
known.
our information is actually online. You can find whether it's from council or from our OMB data, OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, and also, you know, the incentive stuff is from Department of Finance, okay? And when they submit from the Office of County Executive, if they have approved, so what happens is when we have a deal, so to speak, let's say that Economic Development Corporation engaged a company that says we're going to expand in Montgomery County, you know, and Fairfax is giving us this kind of incentive. You know, those location consultants, right? those much hated location consultants, nobody likes those people because they harass you, say, oh, we got this much, what are you going to give us, kind of thing, right? And when that happens, our finance department will look at what kind of jobs the company can promise in what kind of time horizon. And then there's clawback to say, if you don't deliver, then we're not going to give you that, or we're going to even, you know, claw back. Okay, so that's the sort of traditional economic development model. Only if your jobs, by our economic calculation modeling, in aggregate would give community net benefit. So if you have low-wage jobs, in fact, just a couple of months ago, we had an argument internally of whether a long-term local Montgomery County company should receive any incentives for staying here, because we figured that their jobs paid no more than $50,000 a year, and in that calculation, it's actually made county lose money. Okay, so we decided not to give them incentives. So there are times when we make those decisions. Okay, so only if we think the net benefit is going to be